let me welcome all of you to this COVID-19 Business and Society Seminar Series put together by the University of Ghana. The University of Ghana Business School. I'm sorry, I had to control people. So the University of Ghana Business School put together the Cobuss Business Seminar Series, and what we have sought to achieve with these series have been to help to shape discussions surrounding the impact of COVID-19 on businesses and society. As a leading business school within the West African sub-region, we believe that we have a role to play in shaping knowledge and discussions on the impact of COVID-19 on our society. And so we have had these seminar sessions as a way of stimulating this discourse. In past sessions, we have had a deputy governor of Bank of Ghana speaking. We have had the president of the American Society for Public Administration speaking. We have had the head of civil service speaking. We have had mayors. We have had the deputy CEO of the Insurance Commission of Ghana. We have had professors across Europe and the Americas speaking on this platform. I am happy that this evening we have yet another eminent scholar and practitioner to speak to us. First to speak will be Dr. Vinod Sutaria, who is a corporate professional in the US. He is an author, and he's authored the book, The Dynamics of New Firm Formation, and you can find this on Amazon. So colleagues who are here, please grab a copy of this book, and it will do you a lot of good. Over the past 2 decades, Doc, after completing his PhD in economics with a concentration in industry, analysis, and policy, had worked with a number of very large American corporations and institutions, JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo Bank, Comerica Bank, IBM, Landis Strategy and Innovation. He's done work with various universities and the Kaufman Foundation as an entrepreneurial research consultant, and many, many, many more endeavors. He's a master's degree from the Texas A&M University and a doctorate degree from the University of Texas. His research using unique longitudinal exit and entry micro database from high growth regions of the US demonstrate the importance of churning process. Talking about exit and entry of businesses to job creation and economic growth. His work challenging the neoclassical economic view, which tends to focus on equilibrium rather than change, provides policy guidance to government, policymakers, analysts looking into enhancing economic growth through job creation, innovation, entrepreneurship. In the key in job creation, innovation and entrepreneurship is key to remain competitive nationally and globally. And Dr. Sutaria has some very, very experienced knowledge and practice in different contexts. And I think that this evening we are going to be privileged to enjoy a bit of his expertise. He has experience working on various projects as a researcher and consultant. He has experience teaching statistics at the US universities and giving webinars globally, and this is one of such events. He has extreme experience in working in the corporate sector and directing team effort in accomplishing very tight goals. He is a publisher, as I indicated earlier. He is widely cited and published internationally in internationally acclaimed journals. He has participated in a number of industry, market research, and risk management conferences. He enjoys playing tennis, hiking, and painting, and attending astronomical events. He likes photography and music. I think that currently he occupies a position. I don't have that here. I would allow him to tell us what his current position is. But ladies and gentlemen, it's my singular honor to invite you this evening to this wonderful, wonderful personality. If you know what it takes to write a book, to publish, to teach in the university, if you know how to be an acclaimed global personality of this repute, then you would appreciate what we have served for us this evening on our plates. Doctor, the University of Ghana Business School is privileged to have you, and I welcome you. So I just got the information that Doctor is he now works with Wells Fargo Bank as the vice president or president. He'll clarify that. But we are excited, Doctor, to have you. And let me say before you begin your session that the business school is excited to have you, not just for today. We are happy to have you to visit the University of Ghana when all of this trouble of COVID is over. And we are happy to have you to share experiences with some of our students who are here today to listen to you. So on behalf of the management of the University of Ghana Business School, I wish to welcome you to make your presentation. We would usually give you up to 30 minutes or so, and then there will be a Q&A. It's been, in the past, it's been very, very interactive session, and I hope that this evening will be the same. Thank you very much. We currently have 21 people on this bill. Hopefully the number goes up very quickly, and there are people who have joined us on Facebook as well. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Justice Bawali. I hope I kind of spelled it right.
Yes, please.
So thank you very much for the introduction. Yeah, I am at the Wells Fargo Bank as Vice President in the Enterprise Risk Management area. So that's my kind of current position right now. But I really appreciate for giving me this opportunity to give this webinar on the area that is kind of great importance to many people, many governments around the globe. And let me just give you a little bit briefly, because we don't have much time. You are giving me 20 minutes, right? Is that what's we said? 20 minutes, right?
30 minutes is fine. You can take more or less, depending on how it goes. Okay. Yes, please.
Yeah, I have a number of slides. So let me just, but briefly, let me know how I got interested in this particular area. So I have a particular expertise in the scenario analysis in the banking sector. So I do in scenario analysis, economic scenarios like, severe economic scenarios and pandemic scenarios. So this is the one of the area I'm focusing on right now. So that's why I got interested and pulled together, lots of articles, information, and kind of develop a little bit kind of knowledge about this topic. So today I will share some of those kind of, interesting kind of facts and research about this topic. And we go from there. So towards the end of the session, please raise your question and we will try to answer any question that you might have. So let's just, in the interest of time, let me go ahead and start the presentation. So today we are going to talk about the, as the title says, how we can understand the impact of COVID-19, socioeconomic impacts we are talking about. So let's just go about that. So So here is the agenda. So what I'm going to start this topic with is, when we try to study something, we need to understand why you want to do something. So why we want to study the impact of COVID-19. So that's a fundamental question, right? So I will go through those few points why we need to really understand the impact of COVID-19. We need to study that. So then later on, I will go through the economic impacts, the social impacts, and I will also focus on Ghana, some of the socio-economic impacts that country of Ghana is experiencing. We'll focus on policies and strategies, how we can mitigate the COVID-19 risk, and what are the efforts being done by different countries. And we'll talk about survival strategies for businesses. George, is going to talk after me, so he will basically also kind of provide some details on that side. And we will also talk about what the economic future lies ahead, after COVID-19 is kind of, well, not completely over, but at least, we have, to some extent controlled that epidemic. So what is the economic future looks like? And we'll suggest some questions, because I understand there are lots of students here attending the session, BBA, MBA, and PhD students. So I'm suggesting some of the questions that could turn into thesis or master's thesis or PhD dissertation. So I will talk about that a little bit. And then, I will make some concluding remarks. So that is basically the agenda for today. So let's just jump on the point number one. So why we need to study COVID-19, right? So here, there are a number of reasons. The number one reason is basically, this COVID-19 is a global health crisis, unlike we have experienced in last 75 years. So it has caused, enormous human suffering, and basically taken kind of toll on human lives and everything globally. And it has also devastated, economies across the globe. So that's why it is a very significant event, negative event. That's why we need to study. So International Monetary Fund recently reassessed their 2020 and 2021 forecast. And what they basically come up with 2 points. That one point is that we have already entered the recession globally. Some countries may be at the higher level, in a little bit deeper level of the recession. Some may be just entering. That is the scenario we have. So now IMF projects that we can recover from this pandemic by end of 2021, given two necessary conditions. Number one, that countries worldwide basically need to succeed in containing the virus. So if we come up with some effective vaccination within a short period of time, then we might be able to get a good handle on this in controlling this virus. The second point IMF is making is that, countries need to take necessary economic measures to prevent bankruptcies of businesses, and also to prevent massive layoffs, that is undertaken, by different companies across the globe. So if we meet those two conditions, only then and then we can basically, achieve a kind of, success over this pandemic. That's what the IMF is saying. So now what is happening is IMF, because of this pandemic, lots of countries, especially developing countries, are basically requesting loans from IMF. So there is a surge in volume of loans, the request of loans by different developing countries to IMF. So IMF has a big task to do. So right now they are getting very busy in terms of meeting those financial needs of the developing countries. So that's a one point that's why these are the reasons why we need to study. But there are also other reasons why we need to study COVID-19. So if you look at the 7 major economies of the globe, across the world, the 7 economies constitute about 61% of the global GDP. So if you look at US, about 25%, China, Japan, Germany, India, UK, France, those 7 countries basically constitute 61% of the global GDP. When those countries severely get impacted negatively by COVID-19, you can imagine what kind of impact that will have on the global economy, where other countries are also kind of, facing the same situation. So that's why this is a very serious issue. And that's why we need to really understand the impact of COVID-19. The second one is from the business cycle point of view, right? So you all know the business cycle, right? So there are 4 phases of business cycle: expansion phase, boom phase, recession, and depression, right? So business cycle is a continuous process in any economy, as you know. So what is COVID-19 is doing is COVID-19 is basically pushing the country economies for example, peak level or expansion level to the recession level. And I already mentioned in earlier slide that IMF already mentions that the world economy has already entered recession. But some countries are basically getting pushed from the expansion phase to the recession phase. So that's why we need to understand, how COVID-19 is basically impacting the business cycle of a specific country. Now, another thing is that, there are so many types of shocks to the economy, right? Like earthquakes and tsunami and, hurricanes, so many shocks happen to economy. But COVID-19 itself has become an economic shock. So what is happening because of COVID-19? First thing happens is there is a decline in growth expectations, right? Because people just businesses think about, hey, COVID-19 is there, so my business is not going to grow. There is going to be some negative impact on my business. So there is a decline in their expectations about the growth of their businesses, right? So when those expectations go down, the investment by those businesses will automatically go down. They don't want to invest more money in their businesses. They say, they hold on, wait for a while until the pandemic situation goes away or at least subsides, right? Now, because of investment goes down by businesses, the employment goes down. They don't want to hire additional people, or maybe want to lay off people who are not, in order to minimize the expenses. Because of the employment goes down, the real income of people goes down. So income falls, which basically leads to the consumption, decline in consumption, because when people don't make enough money, they basically reduce their consumption. And when consumption goes down, as there is not much demand. So the manufacturing, the production goes down. So this is basically the cycle. This is the shock. The COVID shock is impacting in a cyclical manner to different elements of the economy. So that's why we really need to understand why we need to study COVID-19. So another aspect is a little bit different. So we want to deal with the COVID-19, right? So in order to deal with COVID-19, the local, regional, state, and federal governments, even at the global level, they need to develop appropriate policies. Unless you study impact of COVID-19, you cannot develop appropriate policies in a timely manner. So that's the reason we need to study COVID-19, right? There are other reasons, right? It also helps you scoping out the issue at hand, right? What is the scope of a pandemic in your country? Is it regional level, local level, federal, global, national level? What kind of impact it has? So how deep the impacts are? So that's why it helps you scoping out of the issue. So another thing is the prioritize of resources. Resources are, as you know, in economics, are scarce resources, right? Human resources as well as material, financial resources are scarce. So how you want to prioritize those resources? So that's why you need to study. Provides guidance in using resources most efficiently, helps in developing effective policies and recovery strategies, how you can recover from the pandemic, right? And the last one is basically, identify areas for innovation and entrepreneurship. When COVID-19 basically resets the economy, so that's why the entrepreneurs in your country and globally, they need to develop new innovative kind of, ideas and products. So that also provides the kind of, debit kind of, insight. So when you study COVID-19 impact, you can come up with some kind of, creative innovation and, entrepreneurial policies to survive, to expand your, make your business resilient to deal with COVID-19 situation. So these are the basically reasons why we need to study COVID-19. So given that, let's just move to the economic impacts of COVID-19. So what are the economic impacts of COVID-19, right? When you look at COVID-19 impacts, you can first thing that you can notice is the shrinkage of global economy, right? So all countries more or less have got impacted negatively by COVID-19, right? So there is a shrinkage in the global output, right? So global economy is basically expected to basically shrink by 3%, 3% in just 1 year in 2020, by end of 2020. 3% global economy shrink, it basically comes down to $9 trillion. $9 trillion shrinkage of global economy, which is equivalent to 3 times of India's economy, which is about $3 trillion. So that is the impact the COVID-19 will have a negative impact on global economy, right? The global output is going down, by $9 trillion. The loss of jobs across the industries, the unemployment rates have gone up. That's another kind of issue, another impact. The drop in retail sales, as you know, because the consumption has gone down. That's why the retail sales has also gone down. So that is another kind of a major issue. In fact, it has a kind of, kind of a cyclical impact on other areas too, production, trade and everything else. Declining in manufacturing, as I mentioned, because the consumption has gone down, there is a decline in production and manufacturing. The service industry, because there is a decline in service industry too, because people don't need that many services, financial services or services in other sectors like, tourism, hotel, and those services, restaurants, those services have gone down in also other services. Decline in global trade because of the lockdown. People are, for few months, people were not able to go to their manufacturing plants, so there is a decline in production by countries. So the trade volume has gone down, globally. So that's another kind of economic impact, a significant negative impact of COVID-19. So these are the basically major kind of economic impacts of COVID-19. But look at some of the graphics here. So look at the basically trade volume, right? So trade volume, if you look at here in this graph, x-axis from 2000 to 2022. So if you see up to 2008, when if you remember 2008-9, a global financial crisis basically hit globally. So until then, the trend for the trade volume, the merchandise worldwide trade volume was up to it was going up, but the 2007-8 it basically bumped the expectation down. So it reset basically the forecasting for forecasted numbers. So you can see the blue line after 2008, it's basically going up until it hit COVID-19, right? So beginning of the 2020, right? So when the global economy got hit by COVID-19, the trade volume basically went down. So now there are two scenarios. Okay, the first one is basically the green one is like an optimistic scenario. Let's say we find within few months we get vaccination, and the second kind of phase of the COVID-19 is gone, and everybody is doing good. Have started doing better. So that's a green scenario. So by 2022, as per green scenario, optimistic scenario, we will be back on track. But if the COVID-19 goes on, lingers on, maybe there is a third wave or things like that, it doesn't go away. Government has to keep occupied, dealing with the COVID-19. People have to kind of, deal with the situation. That is basically the pessimistic scenario. If we enter the pessimistic scenario somehow, then the recovery will go up to 4 or 5 more years. So it could go to 2025. So these are the scenarios kind of we are envisioning in terms of the world trade volume. Now here are some of the industries. Some industries are getting impacted heavily compared to other industry. But what are the major industries getting impacted by COVID-19 negatively? So first one is, you can see airline, right? If you remember, I mean, still right now, I want to fly to India, but right now I can't fly because some of the flights are not just going there. So airline industry really completely shut down for a few months globally. So it really hit hard. The number of airlines domestic, they are even going out of business, trying to get support from the government. So airline industry was the number one. Automotive industry, people don't want to purchase like big ticket items. People are holding off buying cars and things like that. So there is a drop in demand for automotive. The hotel and tourism, as you know, Ghana is a big tourism destination. So maybe your economy is also already facing the decline in the tourist volume, and that's why the tourism industry is getting impacted negatively. The hotel industries in your country, so that those sectors are getting impacted, where country depend heavily on tourism industry. The financial services industry, people, financial exchange, like buying house and cars and things like that. So financial services industry has gone down. There is not that much demand for financial services. Oil and gas, as you know, because of the consumption has gone down, the production has gone. So lots of industries that use oil and gas for running their manufacturing plants. Plus the consumers, the common citizens, they use basically the gas and oil for their car. To go to commute to go to their offices, but now most of them are working from home, so the demand for oil has gone down, and the consumer and retail side, because of the economy, the way economy is kind of going down the hill, people are losing the job, not that much income is going down, so that's why consumption is going down, retail sales is going down. So these are basically the main primary industries that are getting impacted negatively by COVID-19. So let's just move on quickly. So here is the equivalence. Look at I just wanted to show you this graph, how the crude oil prices has gone down. If you look at the beginning of the year, it was about $60, but then it came down almost like what, less than almost like $20, right? Around for May, around May, and then it little bit went up a little bit because there was a deal between Russia and Saudi Arabia to cut the production. That's why the oil prices a little bit went up, at a little bit higher level right now. So that is the little bit, that graph basically shows how the oil prices basically moved, during this first 2 quarters of this year, and it also impacts Ghana too. So now, looking at the small impact on small businesses, okay, what kind of impacts businesses are facing. Now, here is the distinction between small and large businesses. Large businesses, they usually have some kind of buffer. They usually keep money aside. They keep the capital aside to deal with this kind of situation. So large businesses manage this kind of situation in a little bit better way. They are able to manage this situation in a better way compared to the small businesses. Small businesses, if this situation lingers after a couple of months, they don't have resources to survive. Their resiliency is very poor. So that's why those businesses, small and medium-sized businesses, are getting impacted heavily compared to the large businesses across the globe. So here there was a study done by Carolina Small Business Development Fund, and they basically identified two areas, two kind of industry sectors getting impacted by COVID-19. The first was the primary high-risk sector. So that sector is basically small and medium-sized employers engaged in direct customer-facing kind of businesses. These includes basically like a retail trade, hotel motel businesses, food services, transportation, warehousing, and those kind of businesses. And I believe country of Ghana, we may be heavily dependent on small and medium-sized businesses, which are going to have higher impact, bigger impact, negative impact of COVID-19 compared to the large businesses. The secondary high risk factors, those are the businesses, those are the secondary one. When the primary businesses get impacted, they negatively impact the secondary big businesses. Secondary businesses depend on the primary businesses. That's where how basically, the automotive industry, retail, real estate, leasing, and those industries are getting impacted. So this was a study done by, Carolina Small Business Development Fund. So provide some kind of insight, and this kind of study could be carried out in Ghana too. Somebody can take up as a research or dissertation, topic. Now look at the social impact. I'm not going to go through all the details, but there are a number of areas where there are social impacts, just like economic impacts. So social impact, like tourism, right? People are not able to travel. Lockdown. There is a lockdown, so people are not able to travel and meet their family and friends, and not able to go to other countries, as a tourist. So there is an impact of that. Healthcare system are overburdened. So people at the hospital, who go to hospital, are not able to kind of get enough kind of medical kind of services. So there is a negative impact. The testing, the testing for the virus is not being done or able at the level that it's supposed to be. The physical, mental health, people are not able to go out, and many people don't have the healthy habits, so they are basically getting stuck at home, not able to do exercise and things like that. So it creates the physical and mental health issues. Self-isolation is becoming a big issue. Work from home is good, but many people would like to prefer to work from office because it provides a bit more professional environment. So impact on low-income people is greater than the impact on rich people, because poor people don't have resources to go for a long time. Their resiliency is very weak compared to the rich people. Rich people have some savings. Poor people don't have some savings. They basically go day by day. A number of people, right? Migratory people. Urban versus rural. Urban areas are getting hit harder than the rural areas because urban areas congested. Difficult to maintain the social distancing. Unemployment, somebody loses a job, it has a psychological impact on the family, because there is no income is not coming, so that it creates a kind of issue. Travel restrictions, families are not able to meet their families. I have cases where some people their families member in other countries, parents passed away in other country, they're not able to travel even to meet their parents who have passed away, or who are very sick, or some people even have parents have passed away. So that is the situation. So education, people, students are working from home, online classes, everything is going on. But the key aspect is, the negative aspect is, they are not able to interact face to face with their teachers and students or their classmates. So, that is, social interaction is an important aspect of social learning. So that is missing. So there are a number of social, negative impacts of COVID-19. So let's just move on to social, particularly in Ghana. So I wanted to develop some slides, gone through a report by the Ministry of Finance, government of Ghana. So there are direct impacts and indirect impacts in Ghana. So if you look at the direct impacts, the first one is investment, right? FDI, foreign direct investment, has gone down, due to uncertainty and closing of the border. So the trade and industry, trade volume has gone down because of the slowing in the production. Agriculture, if you look at the agriculture side, disruption in supply chains for the agricultural inputs can impact the production of the crops, production of the food. So that's why the food production may go down, and it might create a food shortage in Ghana. That is the negative impact on the agricultural side. Commodity prices, decline in crude oil prices, for example, will create a shortfall in petroleum revenue for Ghana. So that's another thing going on. Financial sector, the debt service difficulties, right? People have borrowed money. So now, aviation industry and hospitality industry, they can't pay the debt back. So there is a issue there. They need more time to pay debt, or maybe reduce the kind of, interest rate and things like that. Rearrange the terms of debt. So those kind of things going on. There is another thing is, there is an increase in capital flight from Ghana because, a high proportion of bond held by the foreign investors. So that's another issue. There is a capital outflight, or going to be a capital outflight from Ghana. GDP growth rate, which was basically projected at 6.8% before pandemic, now it is going to be like 2.6 in the event of infected cases, and it could go down further 1.5% if there is a partial lockdown. So from you think about GDP going down from 6.8% to 1.5 or 2%. So there is a significant decline in economic kind of volume. The indirect impacts on Ghana economy is basically through the slowdown of the global economy, right? When the global economy slows down, the import-export goes down, the trade volume goes down, and global supply chains also, kind of disruption in global supply chains also impacts negatively to Ghana economy, because Ghana also exports lots of products like gold and cocoa and some other agricultural products and petroleum products. So that's why it is going to impact. So these are basically some of the direct and indirect impacts, I pulled together for the country of Ghana, just so that everybody kind of, you all probably know, but I just wanted to kind of, summarize those impacts here for you. Now policy, okay, now we talk about economic impacts, we talk about social impacts, we talk about the economy on the Ghana. So now the second part is how to deal with this situation, what kind of policies we should come up with, right? So, and strategies, right? So let's look at briefly of those policies and strategies, implemented by government, international agencies and governments around the globe. So here, so basically, global, if you look at the global level, so there are coordinated efforts going on by countries to come up with kind of stimulus packages. Your country may have already come up with some stimulus packages. In the United States, we gone through, our government gone through lots of providing lots of stimulus packages to stimulate the economy. So lots of new packages have come up to promote economic growth, to help out businesses, small businesses, large businesses, and to also help out people, consumer. They also kind of distributed money to low income people, so that they can continue kind of going with their lives and kind of at least purchase something that is needed for their family. So those kind of policies countries are coming up with. Now the another thing is that the government should basically resist the temptation to develop some protective policies, protective measures. Some of the countries have protective trade policies. So what in this situation, what countries need to do is ease out, make those policies easier, or maybe remove some of those protectionist policies so that they can trade, so the trade volume can go up, and the economy can kind of come up faster in this situation. Countries, some developing countries, they will need to develop specific measures appropriate to their countries according to the situation, local, regional kind of policies. Strengthen the finance provision. Financing is a big thing. So make sure that your businesses kind of get, financing at the easier terms, make it easier. Lots of governments are using fiscal and monetary policies to deal with this situation, to make it easier for businesses and consumers and people to borrow money, right? Waive sanctions. So there are lots of sanctions going on around globally, right? So, but in this pandemic situation, it would be wise to drop some of those restrictive sanctions, so that countries can deal with the situation on their own, right? Especially the sanction on products that they need to deal with COVID-19 situation, like medical tools and supplies and things like that, and other food-related items. So there is a need to waive those sanctions. The regional mobilization in terms of, like regionally, for example, country of Ghana, neighboring countries, they can develop policies that they can increase the volume regionally, trade volume, make it easier to trade countries around your country, right? With the neighboring countries. Engage in private sector, financial sector to support businesses. So, the private sector, make it easier for private sector to lend money to the businesses. The central government can basically, reduce, minimize, the effective interest rate. So that basically impacts the effective rate that bank can provide to loan to the businesses and to consumers. So those are the factors, basically, policies that governments need to take up to deal with the COVID-19 situation. So in economics, there are two types of policy, right? Yeah, as you know, fiscal policies and monetary policies, right? The fiscal policies, distribution of money, free medical assistance, developmental tasks. Government can take up some infrastructure projects so that to provide jobs to the local people. So minimize red tapes. That's another thing. Is globally every country has a red tape, right? So we have to minimize the red tape kind of things, so the things can smoothly, right? So people who need the money or finance or loans, they can get those things right away without getting through the red tape and taking longer time. If possible, provide unemployment benefits to citizens who lose their jobs, so that they can deal with the situation and can provide for their families. So that's another aspect. Government are using these kind of fiscal policies, globally to various extent, right? So the monetary policies, monetary policy basically deals with the interest rate and lending and those kind of things. So interest rate adjustments. In the United States, the federal government has basically reduced the interest rate, significantly, so that businesses, small and large businesses, and people can basically borrow money at a cheaper rate. So that's why the liquidity is being injected into the economy through this monetary process, monetary step, right? I will also talk about Ghana. Ghana Central Bank of Ghana basically also reduced the effective interest rate from 16% to, I believe, 14%. We'll talk about that. So those are the policies being undertaken by various governments to deal with the COVID-19 situation. Increase the lending support to households, employers, financial markets, and state and local governments. State and local governments also need money. So you need to make sure the government, federal government needs to make sure the local governments do get money at a cheaper rate to deal with the local situation, right? Ultimately, it boils down to the how effective the policies will be. The steps will be taken at the local level. So that's why it is very important that local governance bodies are, have enough financial as well as material resources to deal with COVID-19 situation. So these are the fiscal or monetary policies. Now look at the country-specific policy. Because of the time limit, I'm not going to go through each and every step, but I have identified 3 countries where, those countries have taken a number of steps, fiscal and monetary steps to deal with COVID-19 situation, right? Look at the United States, which is about $22 trillion GDP, number 1 economy in the world. So from March 3rd, they have started taking lots of fiscal and monetary kind of policies, reducing effective Fed fund rates and things like that, injecting liquidity, like in terms of billions of dollars in the economy, providing like a financial support to individuals, sending out checks to low-income people, $1,200 checks comes to directly gets deposited into your bank account, or if your income is below certain X amount. So those are the steps US government has taken, right? So I'm not going to go through, because of the time limit, all the different steps, but there is a report out there on online, Congress, US Congress report. So you can go through those ones. So there are all countries across the globe, they have provided all the steps taken by those governments. So here, just United States, you can see, other steps, over time, March 5th, March 13th, March 19th, March 27th, over time, they have taken lots of steps, right? India, for example, which is about $3 trillion, fifth largest economy in the world, the Indian government has injected lots of money, liquidity into the economy through various steps, right? So, 250 billion rupees, $3.4 billion basically into the system through short-term repurchase operations. So these are the steps the government of India has taken, right? So now, those are things. Now, in terms of Ghana, for example, the government of Ghana basically cutting down interest rate, as I said, 16 to 14%. So government of Ghana has also taken kind of, use monetary policy to make it easier for people to borrow money, right? So those kind of things going on. Let me just quickly kind of move forward because of the time limit. Survival strategies. The small businesses can use a number of survival strategies, like, revenue against, they can measure revenue against expenses, curtail your expenses. They also need to continuously basically check the feasibility of your business model, whether your business model is right. They also need to develop the long-term and short-term plans to deal with COVID-19. They also need to provide continuous training to employees to deal with this COVID-19 situation, so they can effectively deal with the customer requests and customers, right? Develop customer-centric business model. Customer is the king. Remember, customer is the king. You are not the king. So that's the business need to remember that. So manage a relationship with third-party vendors, right? So third-party vendors basically need to be managed if you are, if you are getting lots of inputs. So what are the economic future looks like? So number of agencies internationally, they have forecasted what will happen, how this situation is going to pan out in terms of, economic future. So number of agencies like, OECD, World Bank, they have basically projected. So what you see is the blue line, blue bar is for 2020, and for the blue or black bars are basically for 2020-21 forecast. So you can see 2021 forecasts are higher. So what they're saying, basically, the point here is that by end of 2021, all agencies forecasting the economic scenarios, they are saying that the economy is going to come up, given the we are able to, control the pandemic to some extent. So there is a optimistic kind of, forecast here for all economies, right? So if you look at the global GDP by IMF, forecast from IMF, you can see, the forecast because of the COVID in 2020, the GDP globally has gone down by, world, developing economy, advanced economy, and United States. Everybody's GDP has gone down, but by 2021, it is going to come up. So that is the forecast by IMF, right? So these are basically some of the forecasts that indicates optimistic future by 2021, end of 2021. I think all economies are going to get on track and going to start making kind of, growth. So, but the thing is that we also need to keep the other side of the coin, that it could get worse if we are not able to control the pandemic in an effective manner. The vaccination doesn't come out, or there is a severe strain of COVID-19 comes up. You never know. So if that happens, then we are going to face a kind of, more severe or worse kind of a scenario. So that thing is there. Still, we are not out of that. So that is another kind of, aspect of the scenario. Let's see how things pan out. We will see as time goes by. Research suggestions, I will not kind of go through this detail because of time limit, but these are the research questions, right? What are the students, MBA, PhD students can take these questions and develop some thesis, PhD dissertation from this. So the COVID-19 provides a big kind of floor to do academic research. So students and researchers at the universities can take up these questions and develop some kind of research and research papers, publish some papers, write some books, and everything we can do. So what kind of strategies, what is the future landscape, how the consumer behavior is changing. Is there going to be a permanent impact on consumer behavior? For example, here in the United States, lots of people have started making coffee at home rather than going to Starbucks. So those kind of things are happening too, so there are permanent change in the consumer behavior, So geopolitical impacts in terms of, realignment of, trade kind of, relationship between different countries, that is happening globally. The strategies at individual level are also being developed by businesses and by people. It is going to establish a new normal. So how you deal with the new normal, post-COVID. So that is the kind of issue. So you can do some research on that line, right? And how do we assess the social impact of COVID-19 in a more detailed, empirical manner? So these are some of the research questions students can take up. Conclusion: four, 6 areas. People follow the guidelines, try your best to help, improve your health, keep your health up. Government implement appropriate policy, fiscal monetary policy in a timely manner. Businesses adapt, develop creative survival strategies, develop networks, take advantage of government policies that can help you develop resiliency, improve resiliency in this environment, and be basically prosper in the long run. International agencies, they basically, they can focus on coordinating responses across the globe. So there can be a joint front. This is going to be a joint front effort globally. It is not like one country is going to be able to deal with the COVID-19. It has to be a joint effort globally. You as an individual, stay healthy, help out people around you, and support whenever help is needed, or whatever help you can provide. So with that, I basically kind of conclude my presentation. Hope I kind of shared some of the important points here. So leaving the floor open for any questions.
Thank you very much, Doctor. As I said and promised at the beginning, this has been extremely captivating. I am particularly excited about the fact that you didn't just talk about the rest of the world, but you also managed to tie in the Ghanaian situation and giving us real data from Ghana to show how international your presentation has been. Let me pause now and take questions. You can post your questions on the chat platform for me to read for Doctor, or else if you want to ask a question, please put up your hand and go ahead and answer your question. You would unmute yourself and then you would go ahead and ask your question. So let's listen to this. Maybe I should go for my first question whilst I wait for the rest. From your experience, Dr. Sutaria, you know that for most developing countries, we have largely small-scale, private sector-led informal businesses. You talked about how governments can help. In countries such as Ghana, where the economies are largely informal, where companies, or if you like, small businesses are hardly registered, and where you have a lot of difficulty in ascertaining, for example, even the wealth potential or the value of these companies. How do we get government to be able to support such businesses without using the bureaucracy of formality to disadvantage the many? Because reality is many are not registered, many do not have the papers to even show, for example, that many may not even be operating a bank account and stuff like that. How do we get government to still reach out and support such businesses? Because in Ghana, they are the most dominant types of businesses you would find.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, sometimes what happens in life is, when you face certain situations, you are forced to think creatively. And until sometimes situation doesn't arrive, you kind of hold it back, say, well, I will do it. I will, try to do it, this thing, then until, situation comes up, right? So COVID-19 is a situation, is basically, came upon us, but it has forced many countries, at the federal, state, and local, regional levels to think creatively. Hey, we never thought about this registration of informal sector. How we can make that machinery going, right? So or countries will have to set up those things, right? So how we can, for example, let's say XYZ village, right? There are 20 different small kind of informal businesses. How you can make them register? Once you get them registered, so you have to kind of, government will have to kind of set up a machinery. This is what I'm thinking, right? This will force them to do that. And another thing, once you have that kind of registration and machinery set up, you really, that's the main question, how you can deal with the COVID-19 impacts, right? Or how you can basically mitigate the COVID-19 impacts. So in order to mitigate the impacts, you have to adopt a methodological process. So registration of informal sector. Second phase is, what are the needs of that informal sector in terms of finance and in terms of other physical infrastructure or other tools they may be looking for, right? So once you do a little bit quick study of that, and then you can establish maybe small, like maybe government can establish regional rural banks, for example, for something like that. So small, like banks, they can specifically kind of directed to provide loans to those small and informal sector. So that's a second step, right? The third step is try to remove the red tape. Red tape is a big issue globally, right? So this is an opportunity where the governments are forced to basically reduce the red tape, because in the end, the material, finance, and other resources that has to reach to people in a timely manner. If the government has resources, but if those resources do not reach to those needy people in a timely manner, that is too late. By the time they will be devastated, they will be out of businesses, the economy is ruined. Then the cost of resurrecting that economy, when it is already down, it has gone down significantly at the bottom, it is enormous. So that's why governments need to kind of take up this issue, or make the informal sector get it registered, all businesses. Maybe also provide some kind of education, that there could be some kind of training could be done, given to those, that informal sector, how you can deal with the situation. Not only that, but how you can take advantages of the government policies. Many businesses, informal sector, they are not even aware of government policies or the help that government is creating. So that is another aspect. People are just in a small village in Ghana or India. They don't know anything about what government is kind of, not lots of steps they are taking. So you can develop, you can basically approach this issue from multi angles. So one is registration of informal sector, creation of some kind of financial intermediaries or financial kind of sector, like a regional rural banks. Quickly, it can be done. And the third one is the training or the education of the people who are running informal businesses. And then basically the fourth one is basically the monitoring of those policies. Make sure whatever the intentions government had in terms of policies, they are really kind of creating some results, positive results out of that. Make sure the resources are not basically getting wasted. That's very important. The corruption is another issue. So make sure the corruption is not there. Right people are at the local level, the grassroots level, are getting the needed resources which were intended for them. Not like some middle people are getting money away from them as part of the corruption process. So that's another thing. Yeah. Hope I answered that question.
Yes, you did. Thank you very much, my brother. So I have two questions on the chat forum. I'll read both together and we see if we can take them. And then we have Dr. Kwanzaa on the bill, who will give the opportunity to ask his question after I've read these ones. So from Michael says, apart from the strategies outlined, don't we have any positive, albeit economic or social, that have been experienced as a result of COVID? For instance, the private sector in Ghana, in collaboration with the government of Ghana, has succeeded in establishing a 100-bed health facility within 91 days, despite the challenges in our public-private partnership arrangements. Any such examples across the world? In other words, haven't there been any success stories of great things, albeit small, that have been accomplished, even and that you could attribute to COVID? And that leads very neatly into the second question, which talks about the fact that in trying to manage the recovery of COVID-19, many countries have resorted to strengthening local industries to produce PPEs and all of that to be able to be self-sufficient. Could this lead to an industrial revolution in the developing world? Do we see this being sustained after COVID-19? So you could take these two together. And I have Dr. Kwampa, and then I'll come to Dr. Kwampa. Do you want to take these two together?
Yeah, sure, definitely. Yeah, the first question was about the positive impact of COVID-19.
Yeah.
You gave one example in Ghana. So across the globe, I'm not kind of familiar with any specific examples, but some of the things that I know, those COVID-19 basically has forced and basically resulted into some kind of a positive, led to some positive results. So one of the things is, for example, the cooperation among countries have improved. For example, if you collect the Indian subcontinent, right? So now the Indian subcontinent, those countries have increased their kind of, cooperation in terms of dealing with the COVID-19 situation, India being the largest country in that South Asia. So Indian government has basically extended a helping hand to some small neighboring countries, to deal with the COVID-19 situation. So this is just one example. So the regional cooperation, I believe, has kind of, improved. That's one thing. And another thing is that if you look at the countries, like large countries where there is a federal government and there are state governments, right? So like United States and India and other countries, and in Ghana too, right? Central government and local regional economies, right? In Ghana, districts, and I don't know the political kind of infrastructure in Ghana, but federal government and regional governments, right? So the cooperation before pandemic, it was probably not needed that much, but now there is an increased interaction or communication between the federal or the central government and the regional local governments in terms of how to deal with the pandemic situation, how to recover from its impact economically and socially, right? So there are federal guidelines, and local governments are also coming up with some guidelines, right? And local governments are also kind of providing feedback to central government or the government at the higher level. Hey, these are the policies that are, effective. These policies are not effective. So there is a continuous I think the degree of interaction or communication has significantly improved. It has also increased the understanding between federal and government and local governments. So that is a positive aspect. So that is happening right now, and government across the globe are rethinking, how to deal with this kind of situation in a most efficient manner. So what is happening is there is a realignment of resources, material, and finance. The inefficiencies are, I think, being paid attention to, getting removed, being identified and getting removed. So there are lots of inefficiencies in any economy, right? Financial inefficiencies and material inefficiencies, the transportation inefficiencies. There are lots of inefficiencies. The governments are looking at from that angle. So that is a kind of positive side, right? And the same thing about our household, right? Look at the individual household, right? You try to kind of minimize expenses, try to kind of realign your resources even at the household level. You try to save some money. You try not to waste money, unnecessary if it is not needed. So those are things that are happening at the consumer level, individual household level, at the local level, local government and federal level, right? So that's the first question. And what was the second question?
Whether or not after COVID, we are likely to see an industrial revolution because countries are helping to take advantage of COVID to strengthen local production of of medical essentials, PPEs, and all of that. So the argument is that, are we likely to see these domestic drive to produce the needs of the local economies from internally? Will this, do you see this to continue? Or the world will get a reset and then we would go to China and buy from China or whatever? Yeah.
Right, interesting question. Though, if you look at the economic history of the world and the innovation and subsequent entrepreneurship, after Second World War, the first industry that came that basically really changed the global economy of many countries, that was basically airline industry, right? So airline came in a big way. So lots of innovations happen around airline industry, right? Lots of services, jobs, basically got created. All countries got into airline industry, bought planes and different large scale companies, Boeing and those companies came up. So that was the airline, that was the wave came after Second World War. Then another wave came in the 80s, right? The computer industry, right? So the computer came out, and then lots of industries, lots of innovations happen around the main industry. So if you look at the business cycle, what happens, or innovation cycle, the business cycle are based on innovations, right? One major innovation comes up and other small innovations happens around that major innovation. That basically kind of sets a so-called industrial revolution type of jumpstart globally. So the first was airline industry, then the computer industry, internet came after that, and all kind of things happened. You already know all those things, right? And the third one, but I don't think COVID-19, I would kind of, describe COVID-19 as a kind of, as a trigger or to at that level, like the airline industry or the basic computer industry. Because of COVID-19, I believe there will be different type of innovation, especially on the medical side, medical tools and medicines and vaccination, those kind of things, biotechnology, those kind of things. That's a one kind of sector, so it will help. It will probably help develop, it basically, it will kind of create kind of new types of industries globally, through innovation and entrepreneurship. But I don't think COVID-19 kind of, reaches to a level where it will kind of really significantly positively change the economic landscape globally. It will have some positive impact, that is needed. But, COVID-19 has created enormous damage. So to meet that damage, to fill that gap, to meet the damage, some industry will come up. So we will need those kind of industries to come up, not only in the medical area side, but also in other sectors, right? In agriculture, small businesses might come up with some new type of strategies to deal with the COVID-19, right? May create new type of products, not just medical products, maybe different type of products, right? May make it easier for people to deal with COVID-19. So we will see a kind of a growth in some of the industries. Maybe new type of industry will come out, but I don't think it will reach to a level where you can say, hey, this is industry revolution or something like that, right? So I don't think it will happen that level.
Okay.
Yeah. This is my personal opinion.
Right, yes. Dr. Mapa Kwanzaa, please unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you, Prof. Before I ask my question, I would want to just make a quick comment in regards of your earlier question about the what the government could be doing to support the informal sector, owing to the fact that we are dominantly an informal economy.
Yeah.
So I think everything you touched from the fiscal point of view would end up benefiting more of the formal sector. So you realize that even in the budget review, the finance minister made some sort of interventions and, delaying the tax returns date and trying to give some sort of, make some sort of adjustment from that perspective would largely go and benefit the formal sector. So what I thought was an intelligent approach for, and it's specific to our local situation, was the fact that they decided to touch the fundamental need of the people, which is their survival need, whereby people were given food per se, directly, because you are in business because you want to feed yourself and family. So I think that if we had managed that process well, the food distribution, and then the rebates of the what's the name, the utilities that were taken off and currently still existing, was a way to cushion the people directly, so that even if your business is not working well, your survival is intact. So I thought that was good, and we should find a way of making sure that it works. We have the LEAP system and all of these, some of these poverty alleviation programs there. If we strengthen that one, people's businesses may not be working so well, but their life, their survival will be guaranteed. But my question is, are we not surprised? And I'll be glad to hear from Prof. Doctor, especially from the Indian perspective. And I don't know what exactly is happening within the Asian province as far as this is concerned. But I'm asking whether we should not be surprised that we've not taken advantage of this COVID to strengthen our local relationships. By this, what I mean is, in terms of Ghana, for instance, our neighboring countries and all of that. I thought that instead of even putting people at the borders and all the noise that came up in recent times, we could have rather capitalized on this whole COVID and the lockdown issues to see how best we can strengthen our relationship in terms of the economic management, the supply chains, and all of these things. I knew in Liberia, for instance, it was a case that goods could go to Liberia, but you get to the border, and then they get local Liberians they offload it into Liberian trucks, and the Liberian people take it to the country. But I thought that there could have been more collaboration from that perspective, as against trying to build some artificial walls with military men and other things. And my question is whether we are not surprised this was the approach rather in West Africa in particular, as against being more collaborative in nature. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I don't know whether Vinod, you want to comment on that? Do you want to comment?
Yeah, this is like a regional kind of thing, but I will just make one general comment to that question. What is happening globally? If you look at globally, the world is becoming interdependent, right? So COVID-19, basically kind of shows you that, right? So world is becoming interdependent. The problems are becoming global, right? When one country gets impacted through whatever the issue might be, right? It has a ripple impact globally, right? So if something happens, China's, for example, banking rate goes down, or some kind of things happen so to negatively to its economy, it has a ripple impact globally, right? Everybody gets impacted. So, but what is happening here globally is I don't know much about the African kind of organization or economic organization, things like that. But there is a thinking going on, and I think it is also being adopted by countries. So they are coming with regional alliances. For example, India has created South Asian countries kind of alliance, SAARC. So there are lots of regional alliances are being developed to deal with the local regional situation. Local regional means like 4 or 5 countries gets together and deal with a common kind of a problem, right? So in terms of Ghana and surrounding neighboring countries, they may already have it, I don't know, but there could be a regional cooperation of those 6-7 countries, and then they can interact and deal with the common issues for the benefit of those countries. So everybody can learn from each other, right? That's the thing. Some countries may have some kind of strategies that are working out, and they can communicate with other countries. Hey, this thing is working out, against corruption and this and that. So that is basically my take on that. So hopefully, Ghana and surrounding countries can kind of loosen up their borders, or in terms of communication, try to effectively deal with the common issues like COVID. That's basically input I have in terms of the question.
Thank you. And I have a last question, and we'll bring the conversation to a close. And this is coming from Oliver. Oliver says, businesses are, as we know them, pre-COVID era, may never be the same. Do you think that to salvage what is left of the world's economy, businesses, especially those in the most affected industries, should diversify or still hope for a recovery, since you say that this may take up to 5 years for a total recovery from the effect of COVID-19? So is it your advice to businesses that, look here, you need to find something else to do, or else, well, you can tarry and see, and maybe you can salvage? And what's your advice to businesses?
Yeah, there is one thing I wanted to clarify is that, you know, I mean, the most of the forecasts right now, as things are going, we should be able to recover to some extent by 2021. But the worst scenario that I explained, which was the worst scenario, you know, posited by IMF in terms of GDP, in terms of global trade, right? So if we face the worst scenario, you know, maybe third wave or maybe new strain of COVID-19 comes up and, you know, creates havoc across the global in a more severe manner, then we will have a long protracted kind of, you know, recovery. It could be V-shape, W-shape, and U-shape, and even L-shape kind of for some countries, right? It goes down and stays there for a long time, you know, 5-10 years. So that's what I was talking about, right? So, but in terms of, you know, what I'm saying here is that businesses, what they need to do is be positive, develop some, you know, this is your business model, right? Look at your business model, you know, whether the current business model is, does it need some kind of, you know, change? Does it need some kind of adaptation to deal with COVID-19 situation? Maybe you are manufacturing a particular product, particular type of product, right? Do you need to make change in that product, you know, make some change in the features of the product, or maybe even come up with some completely new product? So there are ways to survive, right? You know, everybody can use survival strategies. Businesses can use too, right? You are stuck in some African jungle or some Amazon forest by yourself. You need to develop some survival strategies to survive, right? So that's the situation right now we are in, you know, against pandemic, you know, 19. So businesses, rather than thinking about what they can salvage, rather than that mindset, they need to have a mindset, okay, how we can improve the resiliency against COVID-19 and how we can survive, because this thing ultimately is going to go away, right? It's nothing lasts forever, right? So ultimately we will control pandemic through vaccination in some of the area. The small businesses is a little bit tougher than large businesses because they don't have the enough resources or financial capital, reserve capital, or, you know, put aside. So that's why they are in a kind of a little bit financial distress right now. Maybe government like Ghana, you know, if there is a lots of big informal sector, or there are lots of small, medium-sized businesses, government will have to create specific policies to help those out so that informal sector can survive, or, you know, and small businesses and medium businesses can go through this one, kind of to make it easier for them to kind of, you know, survive during this situation. And on that, the government can do their part, but on the other side, businesses need to also do their own part, be positive, try to kind of figure out, you know, you may be able to develop some products that you can even export. Right now, you can develop some product that is not only demanded by local consumers, but also, you know, it may be globally there is a demand, there is a global demand for that. So you can think about that, you know, even you know, center, maybe, you know, government can set up innovation incubation centers in different districts or areas, and, you know, and go from there. You know, for example, in India, they have developed innovation incubation centers in every district, I believe. So there is a big push on innovation side, entrepreneurship side. So this is the time businesses need to become innovative and become entrepreneurial, and government need to take positive steps. Businesses need to take positive steps.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vinod. Sutaria, Dr. George Acheampong, if you can hear the last comments about innovation centers, our regional innovation centers must push, because this is the time that small businesses are looking up to get help. and advice. This is a time that people are confused and do not know what to do. And this is when we think that it will be the most useful to stretch off a helping hand to businesses. So our regional innovation and incubation centers will be extremely useful in helping to support businesses survive. There's a last question that is coming from Malik Latia. Maybe I'll allow you before we let George come in. He says, as you have 40 years of vast US banking experience, can you have ideas? What are the steps we can apply at ground level to build district banks, as you have just mentioned, being one of the plans to ease the effects of COVID-19? So a bottom-up approach for small rural banks, because they also have been impacted and they are going to have a lot more difficulties managing because their usual clientele is now almost wiped out in terms of businesses. And so how do you recover the banking sector? Any ideas on this for our banking colleagues on this platform?
Let me understand the question. So how you develop the rural financial infrastructure, is that the question?
Yes, how do small and district-based banks,
okay,
how do they recover from COVID-19? Because some of them have been hit hard too.
Right, yeah. So yeah, regional rural banks. In fact, I did my master's thesis on regional rural bank in India, so I know a little bit about RRBs. Indian government set up RRBs in 1973, specifically to provide finance and loans to small and marginal farmers in remote areas in India. So anyway, but so banks like large as well as small, medium banks across globe are facing kind of issues, right? So, loan is getting withdrawn and people are, basically not depositing money. So there are lots of issues, liquidity issue and everything is going on in the banking sector, So, but in terms of developing countries, if you look at the lower level of financial infrastructure, regional rural banks or small business development banks and things like that, right? So they are facing kind of those negative impacts of COVID-19. But in this situation, businesses have to kind of develop strategies to survive. The same way, the regional banks, if they're private sector banks, or maybe there are some government banks too, regional government banks, supported by the governments. So they have to also kind of think through that one, develop their own policies. And now, they may have given loans to small marginal farmers or informal sector or small businesses in that area, in their local area. So they maybe work out kind of some policies, strategies with them, make it easier for the loan they have taken, so try to make it easier so that rather than they default on loans, rather than not able to pay your loans and say, hey, I just can't pay your loan, just forget it, I'm bankrupt. So you don't want to create a situation where somebody who has taken your loan from your bank and defaults. You'd want to minimize the default rate. Okay, how? So you have to develop the strategies to minimize that default rate. So you can make it easier. You can develop some policies. Maybe interest rate you may have set. You can reset the interest rate for that loan. Or maybe make it easier. Maybe the time limit you can improve. You have maybe like 5 years to pay off the loan or 2 years to pay off loan. You can increase the time limit. Give some kind of leeway for those things. So that way, they are able to pay your money back to you rather than just make it and comes to you to pay it off, right? So it is a big charge off. You don't want to go through that one, and that basically may lead to your bankruptcy. Your own bank go to bankrupt. So you don't want to go through that. So you can develop those kind of policy on another side. So while you are dealing with those things, you also talk to your government, like central or federal or state government. Hey, we are performing an essential function at the local level. to finance informal sector and the farmers and everybody else. And that's a very important kind of a service to the economy. But now we are facing this situation, how the government, state or federal government can help us. Maybe they can provide you some additional money at the very cheaper rate or something like that. So you can get some additional kind of help from the government. So they'll basically create different type of new policy. You can kind of communicate to your governments at the state and local level. Hey, you guys need to develop new policies so that that the policy will allow us to get money from you guys, at easier kind of, conditions, so different conditions. So that kind of thing can be done. So there are lots of strategies they can use, but these are some of the kind of strategies that comes to my mind. So it is just a survival strategy at the individual level, at a business level, small, large business level, and at the bank level. Bank is nothing but a business, right? It is a small business, small bank, small business, large bank, large business. It is just a business. So, so that's how you basically treat that. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And let me, on behalf of my management and all of our students, say a big thank you to you for this very exciting, in your place, afternoon, but here in Ghana, evening discussion on the impact of COVID-19 and how businesses would have to navigate their way out. This has been extremely exciting for me. And I know that my other members here on this session have enjoyed the session. We thank you for making time for us. We would take the next presentation, which will come from your friend, Dr. George Acheampong. Dr. George Acheampong is a senior lecturer in the Department of Marketing and Entrepreneurship, specifically with interest in entrepreneurship. And he would be speaking to us today as the second speaker. Dr. George Acheampong will be speaking on 1 minute for me. Dr. George Acheampong will be speaking on the entrepreneurial strategies and how you can manage within pandemics. So the entrepreneurial strategies and pandemics. Dr. Acheampong, if you are here, Dr. Vinod would take off the slides. Great. And then, Dr. Acheampong, you can take over now and share your slides. You have up to 30 minutes, but if you can do it even shorter, it will be sweeter. But over to you now. Acheampong, we are seeing your
Can you see my screen now?
we are seeing your email.
Okay.
We need to see your, no. So you need to go back to your, okay, now we see your picture. Beautiful you. You are more than handsome.
Oh, no.
You are more than handsome, so you are beautiful you. So
we can see you in the parking lot.
Yeah, yes, now you are there. Now you are here.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much, Dean, and thank you very much, colleagues. Thank you very much, students. It's a pleasure to speak on the Cobuss series, and I know you've been dealing with some very interesting topics on the impacts of COVID on business and society. Vinod has discussed extensively the issues at the macro level. And so what I'm going to look at is the micro level, or at the household level or firm level, what strategies firms can adopt in the face of pandemic. So I am focusing more at the firm level, the conversation, and not at the broader macro level that Vinod has looked at. So my objectives, basically, I'll go through the history of pandemics, touching on a few pandemics, the current pandemic, COVID-19, and their impacts, broad level impacts, and the role of entrepreneurial strategies in mitigating these impacts. And I'll focus on what entrepreneurial strategies are, what types of entrepreneurial strategies are we talking about? And then I'll look at post-pandemic, what is the recovery going to be like? What do we need? What are the institutional dynamics that can raise the shock threshold for firms going forward? So in one of the earlier write-ups and earlier presentations on this Cobuss, the Dean, Professor Baule, you talked about COVID-19 exposing the nakedness of Ghanaian society, especially the poor, to quote you. And businesses, as a result, have also not been spared of this nakedness, right? And as Vinod noted, a lot of large businesses have short capital, but a lot of small businesses, which I can term the poor in the business ecology, do not have this short capital. So the question then is, how do such businesses, especially largely informal ones, cope under these situations? And that's the conversation I'm going to try to have. So let's look at the history of pandemics. So the human race or human beings are not new, or pandemics are not new to human beings. From the Black Death in the 14th century to Ebola and AIDS now, or the Spanish influenza in the early 19th century, all these things have hit the human race, right? So the picture on top with the white people are the West African Ebola that hit in around 2016. You have a mother tending for her daughter in Southern Africa with HIV/AIDS. So human beings have been hit with pandemics. And if you look at it, I try to trace it. The Black Death or the bubonic plague claimed about almost 200 million lives. The Spanish flu or the influenza claimed about 50 million lives. You have Ebola. The West African Ebola alone claimed about 12,000 lives. HIV/AIDS from 1981 to date has claimed about 700,000 lives. So when we look at it, there is a history. Human beings have been hit with pandemics, and they have had differential impacts on societies, right? So to look at the current pandemic, we see that there have been about 24 million cases as of this morning, with about 820,000 deaths. In Ghana, we have had about 44,000 in cases and about 270 deaths. Now, this COVID-19 situation has affected businesses from that roadside woman selling foodstuff to factories in Tema that are producing for the global supply chains. So then the question is, how can all these businesses survive this pandemic? Now, for us to survive, we need to first look at the impacts at the broad level. And these impacts at the broad level can be classified into three main things, or the shocks that these pandemics bring can be classified into three main things. One, the uncertainty they create. I mean, now we have a lot of information, so we are not as apprehensive as March 1 or March 14th, when the president declared that universities should close, when the first pharmacy student contracted the disease in Ghana. There was such an unknowable future about what was going to happen. There were so many uncertainties, right? Even at that time, coughing, that we usually will say, God bless you, became a curse to cough. So those uncertainties created problems. And I don't want to belabor the point, but Vinod has extensively gone on about the social impacts or the social impacts of these diseases. The next thing is the resource constraints. Vinod has talked about capital flights. Yes, but there are also disruptions in global supply chains, right? And the impact is that if you were to walk into any electromat shop looking for a Bram appliance or a media or a NASCO, the supply systems are no longer the same, because China, the world's factory, cannot ship out things as much as they can. And things that go by air, like fresh fruit and fresh fruits from blue skies, do not move as fast as they used to be. And there has been the reallocation of global finance in terms of capital flight and the movement of resources. So this creates differential things that affect the society or the institutional environment for businesses. Again, as someone mentioned, these are not all negative, right? There is also the emergence or nascence of new industries that will emerge as a result of what? New innovations and new markets created by the shocks and uncertainty and the resource constraints that come about. So these are going to be the general impacts that will occur. And then the next question then is, how do firms deal with these uncertainties? To move with that, let us first look at, before we move to the entrepreneurial strategies and how they can help us deal with these problems of uncertainty, resource constraints, and the emergence of new industries, let's look at the problems with current approaches in management in dealing with the issues that we've outlined. The first thing is that a lot of business training is focused on predictive logic, the regression model as a line, right? So that logic assumes that things are stable in an environment. But clearly, when there are pandemics, there are shocks. And those shocks send shock waves across the institutional environment within which business is occurring. So that predictive logic to be able to predict things cannot happen. So when we look at the 2008 financial crisis, one of the books that emerged out of that is Ahead of the Curve, or what they do not teach you at Harvard, clearly indicating that regression lines and mathematical models cannot necessarily be able to predict what will happen when new things occur. So the predictive logic that is taught cannot necessarily address these issues. And the predictive logic sort of feeds into the POL model that we teach business students. And this POL model is the plan, organize, lead, and evaluate, or control, as they would say. But this model hinges on, the environment being stable for you to predict. But as I've said, pandemics lead to disruptions, and these disruptions lead to shifts in demand function and supply systems, whether globally or locally, which lead to the creative destruction that we observe in markets and in systems. Right? So clearly, we need new approaches to be able to address pandemics. And we cannot rely on the stable models that we have in addressing the pandemic situations. So that's where I propose entrepreneurial strategy as a way out of dealing with what pandemics. So typically, people have seen entrepreneurship just as formation or creation of what? New businesses, where businesses enter and others exit markets or business environments. However, entrepreneurship transcends that. If you begin to think about entrepreneurship or the entrepreneur as a change agent, right? That is leveraging opportunity, or the entrepreneur existing, or entrepreneurship existing at the nexus of opportunity and enterprising individuals. That's one of my PhD students used to clearly say. So what then will be the entrepreneurial strategy? It is when a firm or an organization innovatively establishes itself in a configuration that allows it to survive and prosper in a chosen environment. So whether that environment is stable or unstable, it is the continual reconfiguration of that business, right, to that environment to enable it survive. That's what we have to term entrepreneurial strategy. So whenever there is an actual misfit between any business and the environment, entrepreneurial strategy is that mechanism that allows it to address that misfit. So when we look at the conversation that has gone on in business ecology literature, for instance, where businesses emerge and die, the key thing is that those that survive are those that are able to continually innovative and survive the environmental dynamics. Because no business is an island. And so entrepreneurial strategy is the one that enables the company to behave like a chameleon and change itself continuously in the space within which it will find itself. So that brings me to the strategies that can be adopted and what specific actions businesses can take to survive. The first one we observe is that when there are pandemics, resource constraints emerge. And hence, a key strategy that firms can adopt is entrepreneurial bricolage. Now, what bricolage basically suggests is that firms should focus on their existing resources and continually tinker, reframe, and recombine those resources to their benefit in that regard. And here, we can observe that even in Ghana, we can see a lot of young, new existing businesses have applied the bricolage idea, but maybe not in a formalized form that they can address and benefit and export, as Vinod suggests in his presentation, for instance. So, for instance, you have Kasapreku that sells alcoholic beverages, tending to produce hand sanitizers. You have Adonko Bitters that sells alcoholic beverages, moving into hand sanitizers also. So we observe, we see even our seamstresses moving into nose masks. So basically, they are tinkering and reframing and recombining the skills and things that they already possess without necessarily requiring new capital or new investment to be able to continue business. In that case, they stay relevant to the environment and are able to survive. Another problem that arises when there are pandemics is the general uncertainty that comes. And here, the effectual strategy is valuable. And effectuation here, basically, you can call it entrepreneurial contingency. That entrepreneurship that is dependent or contingent on the environment within which you find yourself. And that relies mainly on a non-predictive logic. And what is this non-predictive logic? It relies on four things. Rely on your existing means. So those existing means are basically your own personality or your organizational personality, right? Your organizational connections, the connections that the organization has in terms of contacts and those things, and the experiences of the organization itself in creating. So beyond the bricolage idea, they extend the means idea. Again, they suggest that firms go for what? Affordable loss. Now, why affordable loss? Affordable loss is critical because firms should not, during pandemics, invest more than they are willing to lose, so that they do not create another internal shock as they try to deal with the external shock of the pandemic. So firms can invest. It's like when you play Russian roulette or go to the casino to gamble. You put in what you are willing to lose, unless maybe you have unique problems, right? So that helps you to minimize the risk or exposure of further loss. This is particularly true when the environment is continually changing. Secondly, partnerships are key in delivering services. So instead of bearing risks, companies should come together and form partnerships to deliver on what products and services, so that should there be changes, then it can survive the shocks that emanate from the changes in the environment. And finally, contingency. When sometimes companies put in products and services and the environment necessarily do not accept it and pose new things that the environment may need, then in that case, it is not given a shock, but can rather does not see it as a negative shock, but a positive surprise that it can leverage on to deliver the new goods and services that the environment or the business environment will need. The last one will be parallel play. That is used to address the issue of nascence. Now, what happens is that when there are pandemics, as I mentioned earlier, new industries and new innovations emerge. And when these things emerge, the problem is that new industries mean that the business models are not tested. And so those business models need to be tested, right? So there are three things that businesses can do under parallel play to improve their survival chances and even profit from the new businesses that emerge. One is to engage in what I call adjacent play. Now, in this type of play, remember that it's not only the business that's going to be in that industry. Others will also be trying to benefit from the shock. And so they can borrow ideas from those peers, whilst keeping an eye on substitutes, existing companies that provide similar services, but not necessarily the same. Again, the firm should quickly move to market with the ideas that they get from the adjacent play, right? Practicability, let the rubber hit the road and make adjustments as the company moves on. And then finally, reflect and make changes as they go on because of the fluid nature of the environments when pandemics hit. So, having concluded on pandemics, the strategies, I want to just touch briefly on post-pandemic recovery. Now, post-pandemic recovery, what we need as a society or as a business community is that we need to increase the shock threshold. Now, the conversation about the nakedness is a big conversation because a lot of and as Dr. Kwanzaa noted, if after a shock, we have to feed people and provide the basic necessities of society, then the shock threshold is really low. So to increase it, what we need is to ensure transformative institutional change. That stems from institutional reasonableness. And here we need development entrepreneurship. So here it's not just the entrepreneurial strategy, but entrepreneurship that drives development as a whole. And this works through two main mechanisms: an iterative approach and a locally led approach. An iterative approach is where there's a balance between the technical and the political objectives of technocrats and politicians. Because sometimes maximizing the economic outcome or achieving efficiency when politicians have to implement those things where their interests are not served creates problems. So we need that balance between the technocrats and the political class or the political elite to ensure that although interests across both ends are not met, are significantly met. Now, when this iterative approach is met, what happens is that policy formulation, whether at the fiscal or monetary level, can support businesses in a much more stable way, rather than it being a reactive approach to a pandemic. We will be much more prepared for a pandemic than to react to a pandemic as a nation or as a business community as a whole. Now, these ideas should also be locally led in terms of it being coalition building, using coalition building approaches that drive this change. Whether these are non-traditional or traditional approaches, the key thing is to go for a stakeholder approach that addresses the stakeholder politics at the local level. And when I say local level in terms of businesses, I'm not talking about the district, the district to regional to national, but rather I'm talking about the various business groupings, whether the Hairdressers Association or the Guta Ghana Union Traders Association or Shippers Council or Association of Ghana Industries, that local-led associations and policymakers at various levels that support these business organizations is what I'm talking about. So when you look at the political disruptions of the 80s and the media reforms of 1990s, they provide some inspiration. And even when you look at the higher education challenges of the 1990s and the reforms that came in the 2000s, these are all things that were driven by development entrepreneurship. The need to have change at the broader level to give some shock threshold. So if you observe, a lot of the universities, and of course that most of them may be public, that went through these reforms have been more shock resistant than a lot of the private ones that came post the higher educational reforms of the early 2000s. So when we have this, we can build a stronger shock threshold for business, for the business community as a whole. So here I'm not talking about individual businesses, but I'm talking about the industries where businesses operate, having stronger shock thresholds so that the likelihood of being hit by major pandemics becomes minimal, and then companies can then deal with the internal capacity issues that they have to deal with. So in conclusion, what I have sought to say basically is to say pandemics cause disruptions to institutional environments for business, and businesses need adaptations to survive. Traditional approaches of the time will rarely work, but entrepreneurial approaches will offer hope in managing in such times. Thank you very much, and I hope I was on time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Acheampong, for the very insightful conversation about entrepreneurship or entrepreneurial action in pandemics or during pandemics. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my singular honor to invite you now to a conversation about what you think and what ideas you have to be able to show up. Do you have any questions? You want to put up your hand and go ahead and ask it. But otherwise, I would usually take advantage of my being the moderator and give a first shot. But let me listen to you if you have. If you have any question, please show by hands and unmute yourself. Dr. Kwanzaa, did your hand just go up now? If yes, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much, Prof. This is not a question, but just to, it's more like a piece of advice to organizations. I think based on what Dr. Acheampong has been talking about, the essential thing, which I think we realized a lot of our local businesses did not have, was that they didn't have a business continuity plan. So it was, some people clearly didn't know what to do. What I knew some professional services organization tried to do was to provide some free webinars and try to sort of help some organizations to quickly activate, establish and activate some sort of business continuity plan to be able to readjust and then get things done. And out of that, we have found that there is a lot more collaborations from now, even between some organizations and delivery firms. People have taken advantage of the internet and then mobile technology to sort of run a portion of their businesses online to be able to engage their most critical constituencies. So what should be the case going forward, I think, is that a lot of our local firms must try and institute some business continuity plans, and from time to time can do some sort of dress rehearsals to prepare for some uncertainties. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Sutaria has a question. Please go ahead and ask your question, sir.
Sure. One of the question I have is, since I have been involved in the past with one organization, non-profit organization here in Kansas, providing kind of, consulting advice to businesses who want to start, people who wants to start new businesses. So in terms of promoting entrepreneurship, innovation is one side, but once you have innovation, the second stage is turning innovation into putting out in the market. That is basically entrepreneurship. So what sort of kind of infrastructure, I would call it, that includes everything like, entrepreneurship advising centers and maybe government, some kind of support infrastructure. The I would call it the environment where university interacts with the industry. So it is university industry alliance, right? Research that happens, innovation kind of thing in university that goes to the industry, and like there is interaction, right? So I'm trying to understand what kind of entrepreneurial or innovative infrastructure or supportive infrastructure you have within Ghana, and what kind of role universities may be playing in promoting entrepreneurship within the country of Ghana, and how maybe another thing is how or in what way university thinking is impacting the formulation of entrepreneurial or small business policies by the government. So that's basically the overarching question I have.
Yes, Dr. Acheampong. So my question, Dr. Acheampong, is...
can I take Vinod and then I'll take yours?
Right, that's fine.
So I don't lose, yeah. So, I mean, Vinod, universities have been playing critical roles in terms of the entrepreneurial ecosystems in Ghana. Since about 2004, 2005, the University of Ghana, for instance, has been focusing on a mindset change. So in the mid to late 2000s, there was a course that every single university student was supposed to take on entrepreneurship. When we moved towards the 2010s, 11s, thereabout, we moved towards more of departmental focus, where entrepreneurship is taught at pharmacy, engineering, School of Agriculture, School of Medical Sciences. So it's been a mindset change, and you can see that mindset change reflecting in the GEM, Global Entrepreneurship Monitor results. What is left now is that transition from mindset change, because now people see entrepreneurship as a positive career to pursue. What is left is to now translate that mindset change into opportunity-driven businesses, because what we are observing is that it is those in the informal sector that are driving it, and a lot of them are in necessity entrepreneurship. So we are trying to move more towards opportunity-driven entrepreneurship. And what we are saying is that, so the University of Ghana Business School has a hub, an innovation and incubation hub. The university also has Applied Science and Technology Institute that develops those things. There's an the School of Agriculture has its own hub as well. So there are other hubs in town, WorkShared, there are digital skills initiative all over in town, like Shronko Academy. There is Meltwater School of Technology. So we have a lot of these hubs that are emerging, and a lot of them are springboards, people who are given the mindset from the universities that are moving on to champion these things. So if you look at the addressing system in Ghana, for instance, it was designed by someone who was in the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. So that's been the ecosystem. It's been slow, but it's building up. So we do not have the ecosystems you would have probably like the biomedical services in the Orange County in California, for instance, or what you have in Silicon Valley. But we are building gradually ecosystems around that will support these things. Thank you very much.
Let me just add, Dr. Acheampong, that it hasn't been very quick to take off, but there has been a lot of conversations by government of regional innovation and incubation hubs that will support people across the regions. We have had conversations with government, the Ministry of Business Development, on how we could partner to provide services to small and medium businesses across the country. And we are looking at a number of centers across the country. So, you know, university government initiatives, hopefully we can get the private sector to onboard this and to get a lot more resources to be able to reach a bigger constituency. So these are things that, but George, I was going to be asking you something a bit controversial, because when you started, you spoke about the fact that business schools give predictive models that students are supposed to apply. And these models assume a certain stability within the environment. You ended up also giving us a prescription. Would your prescription work within in uncertain times? Or these, like you put here, non-predictive models, to what extent are these non-predictive, and to what extent would this be able to survive within turbulent, very sophisticated, complex, uncertain environments as we have now? Yesterday, I was talking to my church youth, and people have no sense of when things would end. And so the idea about a certain model of entrepreneurship and how people should start or begin and end doesn't appear to be working, and people are confused. So how robust is your model to helping people to survive?
I can say very robust because the whole idea of entrepreneurship relies on uncertainty, creative destruction. So once there is equilibrium, and Vinod will know this, once there is equilibrium, there is no opportunity to be entrepreneurial. So you need to distort the market. And so when markets are distorted, that's when the entrepreneurs come in. So here, the whole strategy here is to say, and here I'm speaking to existing businesses, not necessarily people who are now kickstarting, although these ideas are rich for them as well. But the idea, if we look at effectuation, for instance, in dealing with uncertainty, now, when you have your own needs, which is who you are, whom you know, and what you know as your existing needs, here there are no financial resources that are required. Number two, when you move to affordable loss, you are only investing those of your resources, whether it's time and effort, that you are willing to lose. So whether the shocks create changes or not, you are not afraid, and you are willing to share that risk, even that small risk, in partnerships with others, and willing to leverage on the surprises that come as not negative feedback. Remember, under the POE model of plan, organize, lead, and evaluate, whenever you do not meet your targets, they are seen as negative deviations. But under this model, the idea is to see them as customer feedback for what the business should be and not what you think the customer needs. So that's the kind of thing entrepreneurial strategies give you. They give you that dynamism in the environment to survive, to continually change. And I always give this example, and forgive me those Church of Pentecost people here, but I give the example of those who set up pubs, beautiful pubs, and those women who, Davies, who sell their beers in beer bars. Nice pubs emerge constantly, and they go out of business in 3 or 4 years because they are no longer the most fanciest place to be. New fancy places emerge. But that woman, Atigome, who sells her beer under a tree, right, with that reputation, has been in business for 25 years. You may think she is not growing, but what is it that keeps her in business? That keeps knocking the others out of business? Because when things come, she is effectual in her approach and growth, rather than that planning, I need to do this, I need to do that. And so when targets are not met, they are disappointed. When you look at the typical Peru boy, it's the same thing that they leverage on in their growth. And that's the kind of thing I'm saying, that entrepreneurial strategies give you that flexibility, right? Without coming up with without also saddling you with the innovative curse. Something I did not talk about here. But when you innovate too much, you are faced with a curse. So you are able to avoid that and be stable in the environment necessarily to survive. And that's what businesses need in a pandemic, being able to be flexible also.
Thank you very much, Dr.
Oh,
Acheampong.
one comment I wanted to make, if you don't mind.
Yes, please go ahead. Go ahead, Sinod.
Yeah, this is kind of my area of interest, and my PhD dissertation is on that area. So George mentioned briefly about creative destruction. Schumpeterian notion of creative destruction, creation of new businesses, innovation businesses, and destruction of complacent businesses, those who cannot compete because they don't do innovation and they have to get out of the businesses. My personal experience, from India and from other developing countries, that governments somehow, I don't know what is the situation in Ghana, but many governments in those countries, they basically try to keep those businesses alive. Still, they're feeding some money, some kind of subsidies. They want to them keep alive because they are providing some employment. But those businesses are really not needed by the economy. So the creative destruction, as George mentioned, it's basically, that's the way it is. Economy is never at equilibrium. It is always try to reach the equilibrium level. And in that process of reaching to equilibrium, the innovation and the entrepreneurship, subsequent entrepreneurship, that's basically the place. So that's why economy continuously tries to reach the equilibrium level. And that is where the innovation and entrepreneurship comes in. And that's why creative destruction is becoming an important kind of, kind of a topic nowadays. 30 years ago, nobody talked about innovation and entrepreneurship that much. I live right here in Silicon Valley, very, very close by. Steve Jobs' house is only 2-3 miles away from my house. So this is right in the heart of Silicon Valley. So I'm involved with some of those techie guys here, the Google, Facebook, WhatsApp, and all kind of companies are around here, headquarters down here, just within 2-mile radius. So there is lots of, in this area, lots of conferences, lots of innovation type of discussion is going on. Informal discussion. There are lots of small groups. They talk about their own industry. So that is basically, it provides a industry university kind of infrastructure. Stanford University is very close by. So Stanford University has big entrepreneurship innovation department. So it is like, it is like I would call it an infrastructure, environmental infrastructure, where university, this private sector, the entrepreneurial people, the informal kind of networking groups, that all pulls together and creates an environment where somebody wants to just start a business. You have innovative idea. Many people have innovative idea, but they never start any business, never move to entrepreneurial stage. There are so many talented people everywhere in the world. But they have lots of ideas that make things efficient, more efficient, So that's what it is, So right there, creative destruction is the key buzzword right now nowadays, and hopefully Ghana moves in that direction, Yeah, this is my book. It basically, it's based on my PhD dissertation. So look into that if you have time. Is Amazon.com. But this talks about the whole book is about creative destruction. And I have proved empirically how the new business formation and terminations, exit and entry of businesses, the churning process, how it basically drives economic development and growth. And this concept is very relevant to developing countries rather than the advanced countries, because developing countries need to move into the innovation phase, entrepreneurship phase, to move forward, to come out of this, the lesser developed kind of a stage. Yeah, that's basically wanted to share my thoughts here. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Chief Tano, you are here. If you don't ask a question, when we meet, you know what I'll do to you. Chief Tano, if you don't ask a question, you know what I'll do to you when we meet. Those of you who know the Rollins and the Bidizidin story, you know what that means. So please ask a question.
Hello, Doc.
Yes, please, Chief. And then I can see Saliu. Saliu, you are here. I'm waiting to hear questions from you because you are IB students who would have experienced a certain level of uncertainty in your thoughts Even for those who are not managing businesses, there is confusion in your thoughts. What do you have to ask our two presenters today? Yes, Saliu, your hand is up. Chief, we'll come back to you. Otherwise, Chief, if you have a question, you can go ahead. I'm just...
Saliu here.
Yes, Saliu, go ahead.
Yeah, a great presentation from Dr. Vinod and then Dr. Acheampong. I am really fascinated with the point that there was another doctor who made about lack of BCPs that a lot of organizations do not have.
Yeah.
At some point in time, you know, we were even thinking, because of the disruption that happened to the academic calendar,
yeah,
whether the university also had one.
Yeah. Okay.
But we quickly had to switch to online.
Yeah.
But business continuity is very critical. I think it's a huge aspect of what has helped those organizations that have been able to scale over and still be productive during this pandemic. That has been the key differentiator. So if you take my organization, for instance, we test our continuity plans in actual testing every quarter. So we go out of the office and we simulate scenarios. So the scenario might not be COVID, but it's a disruption. And once you are able to work properly during a disruptive scenario, you should be able to work well post it. My question to Dr. Acheampong is, I've seen his model from a point of view of an ongoing concern, which is a business. It is truly workable. But I'm thinking of the small entrepreneurs that are managing this huge disruption, how they would be able to have access to this wealth of information for them to also be able to have a semblance of normality post the pandemic. Because oftentimes, most of these great thoughts seem to be limited within a very small, sector. How are we going to give out this advice to the majority or to the 95% of the SMEs that are struggling during this particular time? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So you see that it is good to squeeze you out to come and ask the question. Dr. Acheampong, please, over to you.
So, I mean, I like the idea and the conversation about business continuity plans. First of all, let's move to a lot of the small businesses. The question is, do they even have the capacity? You look at your average small business in Ghana, give and take. I don't want to even talk about, if you look at the GEM data, about 95% of Ghanaian businesses are necessity driven. Meaning we are talking about capital ratios, investment ratios less than $200, maximum $500. $500, that's about 2,500 cedis. And where there are even large capital ratios, they operate informally. And it's more valuable to be informal than formal. The conversation of when it's good to be formal or informal is another conversation. But majority of these people do not even have the capability to manage their businesses, not to talk about the continuity plans. Maybe the conversation we need to have, and Sally, you asked me a very relevant question, maybe, is how do we break these things to smaller silos? And that's where the Dean mentioned that the Ministry of Business Development is trying to contract the business school to sort of set out these business centers to help our various small businesses in Accra, Takoradi, Kumasi, and Tamale as hubs to drive this, and whilst at the same time allowing our students to also build their capacities. So maybe that's the future of the conversation we need to have as to how we are going to do this. But we need to look at downscaling it from a large-scale enterprise conversation to a small, informal, tabletop trader type of conversation. I mean, Vinod, I'm sure you are familiar with the Indian slums and the businesses that operate there. The kind of conversation we may need to have in there. But maybe, Sally, MTN can offer us some money to engage in this at the private level. So maybe we can have a conversation on the side.
Well, that's a good conversation, because today we were just talking about a competition for our students, and we are looking to be able to support. When we moved online, a lot of our undergrad students actually fell through the cracks and had major difficulties. So we're coming up with a competition that we would want telcos to help us to resource up to about 50 or 100 students with laptops. So Sally, we are going to come to you and ask you to render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. Thank you very much. Do you want to ask a question?
Oh, Doc, good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Good to hear from you. I've really enjoyed the conversation, and I would just have to make some few suggestions rather.
Okay.
Yes, I think that I mean, entrepreneurship should be something that should be driven, or that spirit should be really whipped up by institutions, by the academic institutions.
Okay.
And there should be incentives every now and then to encourage people to go into it.
Okay.
I sit here as a small startup trying to internationalize, and I can just see the effect of the COVID on the entire supply chain between my activities and a whole nation. One nation in how do you call it? West Africa, Liberia. I'm doing value books for them, and because of COVID, I cannot fly the items to them, and that is very serious. That is very serious, and it gives me the idea of why don't you think about internationalizing or developing the industry capacity at the firm level, as Dr. Acheampong taught us in the first semester.
Right.
So I'm in talks with some people there, and we've gone far, but it's so surprising. Let's say the whole value books of Liberia, their VAT books, I print it here in Ghana, and for 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, I've not been able to fly it over to them simply because of COVID. The borders are closed and all. So it brings opportunity for us to think outside the box that, okay, you have some strength here, you can leverage it or partner with other people, if not at the national level or at the firm level, and, you know, or expand your horizon. For me, it creates a business opportunity for me. And I also saw that during COVID, there were a lot of people, like Dr. Acheampong said, who were able to come up with innovative ways to do business. For example, a lot of businesses moved online to sell, and that was interesting. And it also boomed the how do you call it? The delivery industry. I mean, how do you call it? The couriers. They really that industry became very, very vital to the survival of even families, home affairs. People could shop basic home things. They could shop and bring it to them because they have their couriers who moved online. Before, people never thought about it. So for me, I see a growth in the technological industry when it comes to IT or maybe telecommunication. People are beginning to appreciate and understand how it works. And a lot of businesses will move from the physical to online. And these are very positive things for the growth of Ghana. That is what I want to contribute to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief. So you see,
if I can add something little to what Chief just said.
Yes, please.
So the emergence of those new enterprises as a result of COVID, we should be careful. Not all of them will survive because there's going to be a shakeout. And that shakeout is going to retain only the most efficient firms. So if we look at the bikers or the delivery bikes, for instance, now everybody is into delivery bikes and everybody is moving into online business. But there's going to be a shakeout in either consolidation or failures, so that the most efficient ones that can offer it at competitive rates are those that are able to survive. So that's where, for instance, my third point about parallel play comes into focus. Then you need to focus on the existing substitutes, large firms that used to do delivery before COVID. Those may not have been using bikes and were not online, were using like the Ghana Post model. How do you leverage those ones? What skills, what mistakes did they make to create the new business that you have in order to survive? So those are some dynamics that will also occur, and firms must think about it in that respect.
Thank you very much. But Chief's comment actually fed into the comment that one of my colleagues, Professor Akoto, Eunice Akoto in Henderson State University in the US, who was watching us on Facebook, put up. And she talked about the issue of integration during the COVID within West Africa. So integration within the West African sub-region, and the fact that she did appear to have seen much more done in that regard. We saw borders closed. Ghana deployed military across its borders to prevent people from entering and exiting. And what that meant was that, of course, the fear of COVID was imminent, but what it meant is that countries, businesses that did cross-border, activities were almost immediately grounded because people could not move. And she wondered whether or not there was a way that we could actually have improved our integration even within COVID. But reality is that each country was concerned about protecting its or her citizens, and therefore didn't open up. Mamiesi, Deborah, you have a question, please?
Okay. Yeah. Hello, sir. Good evening.
Good evening, madam.
Please, my question is on how entrepreneurs can get the best out of their workers after the pandemic. During the pandemic, because of the pandemic, most workers have been asked to stay at home and they are not getting any allowances or salaries. And these entrepreneurs are expecting that when things are better, they will call the workers back. So how best can they get the best out of their workers after the pandemic, after letting them stay at home for about 5-6 months without any allowances? And also, how must entrepreneurs manage their staff in times of pandemics?
Great. That's a very important question. I have been wondering if I were in a job that laid me off during this era, whether I would be excited to go back to that company once they came back and say, hey, can you come around? But of course, it is also the case that I would be looking at whether or not indeed my company had the capacity to have kept me. And the reality is that most of the companies had no means of keeping their staff. They couldn't just do it. And so under the circumstance, I am sure that I may not blame the owner of my employer, because I know that they couldn't. But there are some companies that literally coil back just because they thought they should protect what they have, and threw their staff under the moving vehicle. And if that is the case, as I say, like you said, it's going to be difficult for people to go back. And those that will go back may do so for lack of alternatives, and therefore may not be as committed as they would be, because they would go half-hearted to say that, well, when it was tough, you threw me out. Now let me come back and get what I will eat. But if I can get an alternative, you will not be my priority. I will move out. I don't know what, if Vinod has any comment to make on that, especially the second part of how to keep your staff and to get the best out of them.
Yeah, just one comment I would like to make is, different industries, different sectors are impacted differently, right, at different levels, right? So, as I mentioned before, large corporations, large companies, they have some capital buffer, they save money aside to deal with this kind of situation, right? So they are in a different ball game, right? So there may not be need for them to kind of lay off people right away. But smaller businesses, like medium-sized small businesses, like, people, family businesses, Now they don't have that much capital buffer or any kind of reserve money to deal with the situation or to go for a long time. So the resiliency period is very short, right? So maybe in 2-3 months things doesn't improve. They don't have any other means unless the government provides some support, right? In that situation, they will have to let the employees go. So this is the kind of a situation we are in right now. I mean, large corporations are also laying off people, not just the small, medium-sized businesses. So it's a situation where everybody need to develop their surviving strategies, right? At the individual level, at the large corporation level, or at a family business level. Maybe only thing is I'm thinking is how things can become easier for people who are kind of likely to getting laid off. Is government can come up with some kind of unemployment kind of package. I don't know what kind of unemployment packages or something you have in Ghana, but in United States, they get like some few months of unemployment package until they find something or come up with something. So that's the kind of only thought I have. Hopefully, this kind of situation also another way. It kind of forces people or the small companies also to come up with some innovative ideas. So if you're an employee of a small companies, maybe there is an opportunity for you to become innovative, creative, and suggest something to your company. Hey, this product is not working out. There is not much demand. How about we change, modify product, or how can come up with a new product, something that you can market in this environment. Maybe there is a more demand, higher level of demand for that particular product. So you can kind of influence your senior management within your small company that way. So that may be another way. So they may be, rather than getting rid of you, rather than lay off, they might probably just keep you in. Hey, yeah, why don't you just develop this kind of some kind of new ideas, new products and things like that. So that's where we are right now. So I think this situation is forcing everybody to be innovative.
Yeah, and I probably think that greater transparency in these times would probably help a lot. Greater transparency with people who manage businesses and how they deal with their employees, allow employees to appreciate that, well, there's not much that could be done. Or in this engagement of transparency, staff could come out with alternatives on how we survive whilst we are in this together. And stuff like that. Belinda has a follow-up question to Mamiesi's question. Said, how do entrepreneurs get the best out of their workers who are still at post but enjoying flexible working hours? Oh my God. I'm currently struggling with this, where you have people, staff are supposed to work only a number of days in a week, not as usually they would do. 5 days in a week, and you get them and they come, and I have my heads of department complaining about productivity and the fact that the system isn't working the way they think it should work, and stuff like that. So indeed, that is something that all managers and employers are dealing with, how to get their employees to work well. There are people who are working from home. There are people who are working a certain number of days. There are people who are working fixed number of hours, and all of this. One thing that I have, perhaps my suggestion based on my personal experience, is that I've had series of engagement where I tell my staff that, look here, we are only able to keep paying you because we have money. And if you are not contributing to ensuring that we still have money, because my students have to be satisfied, if you are not attending to my students and they don't pay me their fees, I'm not going to be able to pay you your next allowance. And I keep telling them that we need to be able to get our people, our students, and their needs responded to, so that they can keep paying us and so that we can keep paying you. But Saliu has a point to make on this point. Saliu, please go ahead.
Yes, Prof. My thoughts are, I mean, as you mentioned, it's a real challenge for most businesses having to get the best out of their employees working from home, because the concept itself is very alien to all of us.
Yeah.
But what we are currently doing is to approach it from an outcome point of view instead of a KPI point of view.
Right.
So a lot of organizations would have, okay, you have key performance indicators that you're using to measure an employee's outcome. Now you need to shift it to an outcome point of view. So what do you want the employee to bring back to you as value, as an employer, for you to consider that as enough remuneration for you to also pay back the salary that you continuously pay? That's number one. Number two, you also need to start looking at reallocation of resources, because you will definitely have certain roles that would not necessarily be required to work from home. Now, if those roles are not required, then you need to reallocate those resources into other areas where you would be able to track productivity. So if we take the university setting, for instance, if let's say Dr. Acheampong has 10, support staff, and at this point in time, he can make use of only 2 of the support staff. The other 8 should be redirected into, let's say, student welfare services. You can imagine as a student would feel like receiving a call. I'm calling from Dr. Acheampong's office. You are one of his students. He just asked me to call to ask you how you were doing, how's work, everything fine, how is school, how can we support you? So things that, you know, ordinarily the business would not do, they should reallocate those resources into doing those things. Although they may not end up seeing the value of it today, it's going to end up giving a very long-term lasting impression. So reallocation is one, and then outcome-based, what do you call it? KPIs should be what should be used.
Right. This is extremely excellent. I think we're learning quite a lot, and I am learning a lot from this as well. We have two.
One point, Professor
Yes,
Justice, one quick point I wanted to
yes,
make
please,
here.
Go ahead.
Yeah, regarding this question, you know, the working from home, you know, the productivity, maintaining productivity from employees while working from home. So, you know, one thing we have learned is basically, you know, you set expectations very clearly. What are the expectations as a company you have from the employees? So you write it down, make sure both the manager and the person reporting to the manager are on the same page. There is a clear communication between them. There is a transparency. So those kinds of, as long as, you know, the person working from home can get the expected work done, that's basically what counts. You know, there should be like a, rather than, you know, having an eye on them, it should be like a kind of a trust kind of environment. Hey, you know, these are the 10 different kind of, you know, projects or something, you need to get it done within a month or 2 or something, you know, and then the person satisfactorily finishes those things and things go from there. So it is like a trust building. I think what we need to do in this environment when people are working from home, it's like a also work on the trust building kind of a environment where there is a trust between employee and the, you know, his or her supervisor, and the expectations are clear, and there is a kind of continuous communication, clear communication, you know, those kind of things. So there is no kind of confusion. Oh, I thought this way, I thought that way, you know, I couldn't finish it, or this and that. So those are the things that works well for everybody's benefit. That's what I'm thinking.
Thank you very much, Vinod. 2 last comments from Chief Turner. If your hand is still up, that's fine. Otherwise,
yes, sir.
And then
yes, sir, my hand is up.
Dr. will get the last one, and then we'll put it to an end.
Okay. Thank you, Prof. During the COVID, you realized that a lot of companies started letting their people work from home. And one thing I realized was that it helped families to get, especially children who seldomly saw their parents together, started to have that kind of family life, which was a very good thing. I observed that myself, I experienced it, which was very nice. But one thing I observed was that private sector workers suffered a lot than government employees. Now, my question to our speakers is, if I am a young entrepreneur or a student coming up and I experienced this, where I saw private sector mass unemployment because of COVID or such unforeseen circumstances, why would I venture into entrepreneurship whilst I could go for a government work and be secured, where, I mean, whether COVID or whatever will come, I will be safe? Because you do not hear government reducing salaries, government, reducing incentives or something like it's happening in the private sector. So what can we do to rekindle the spirit of entrepreneurship in our system against this observation? Thank you.
Very, very important question. Especially for the risk-averse individuals. Why should I? George, do you want to answer?
Yeah, I mean, and that's why in the post-pandemic recovery, I talked about development entrepreneurship, where my focus is on raising the shock threshold for the industries. Because if there is no way government can employ every one of us, especially when we have differential skill levels. And so generally, what we need is for the private sector to be shock resistant. Whether we can go improve the growth propensities of these firms. Currently, we are losing about 90% of our firms in 2 years. If we can, that is in the absence of a pandemic. So if we can generally improve their propensities to about 80% and retain 20% every 2 years, that means that they are able to grow. And when they are able to grow, then they can build the shock capital that Vinod talks about to cushion them against these pandemics, right? But as it stands now, if the shock resistance is low, then that's where we have a problem. So we need to operate more at an industry level that saves a lot of these firms and not necessarily try to provide jobs for everybody. So that is one. My fear, however, when we say we should do those things is that government would rather go to throw money at the problem, like it's been done, rather than try to go for what? These iterative and locally led solutions at the various industries, because various industries will have industry-specific ideas. And so if you do not go for it and you decide to throw money at the problem, then what happens is that the money goes away and then the shock capacities are still low. So that's where I would encourage things to be. I do not necessarily, I mean, when we were talking about the jobs and why if you are laid off and you're called back, you should go back and those things, it's the fragility of skills. And the ILO has been looking at that. It's the fragility of skills. If you work with someone I don't think masons have been out of job or plumbers have been out of jobs. Once the skills are required in the economy, they will be required. But it's the fragility of skills. If you're a laborer, however, where you go by day and get paid, and that's where the challenges begin to emanate, in my opinion. But of course, this is up for discussion and we can engage a bit more. I don't know what Vinod also has to say about this, though.
Yeah, I would just make one point here. A very general point is that, I mean, I am, from India. I spent my first 30 years in India, so I know how the government sector works. So there is a tendency among people, citizens, to get a government job because it's kind of laid back job and this and that, you can basically listen crickets to kind of commenting everything from while you're working at the government office and things like that. So, but what I'm thinking here in this new kind of economy we are talking about, which is innovation and entrepreneurship based, that is going to happen in the future and it is happening right now. So when, let's say someone is laid off from a private company, so rather than, looking for a job within the government sector, making it easier, they are not kind of, cutting your pay scale and everything, thinking about those things. So maybe you can, think about becoming more entrepreneurial, you may have more kind of, high level of rewards in the end you can get, and once you start a business, there is opportunity that not it will generate only job for you, but you can even hire, other family members and other people, neighboring areas. So you can kind of contribute to your national economy just by becoming an entrepreneur. You create a job not only for yourself, but also for other people. So that's way overall kind of, the economy will have more job creation, and an economy which is kind of, characterized as a job generation, job creation type of economy where lots of jobs are getting created, that those economies basically progress. They make progress in terms of making economic development. So rather than developing this kind of a little bit pessimistic kind of view that if I get laid off from private company, I will just try to look for a job in the government. You might have a little bit difficulty, but there are, there are lots of resources out there. Ghana is a big country. There are lots of natural resources and lots of intellectual resources. So you can come up with some ideas. And now the world is very interlinked. Develop some products you can market in India or China or anywhere else. Those kind of things. And some kind of handcraft products or anything can happen. I mean, there are lots of different ideas. There are lots of demands. I buy some simple things, some kind of carvings on the wood, and I pay like a $25 down there. It's very simple thing. So there are lots of those kind of things. So that's what basically my kind of take is on that. Rather than depending on the government, we should, as an individual, become entrepreneurial, innovative, and help out, the government, your local economy, local society, and be part of the economic development of your country. Yeah, that's what my take is. And yeah.
Thank you very much. Now, Mapa, you take the last, but let me go to Enoch. Enoch Acheampong, your hand is up. Please, your question or comment, and then we'll take the last one and we'll be out of here.
Okay, sure. Thank you very much, Prof. Mine just traces back to around 2010 when I was in Denmark and was focusing on sustainable development. And one area also organizational restructuring and also sustainability. And I recall that in that setting, in the Scandinavian setting, a lot of these things we are talking about, they have sort of leapfrogged it a long time ago and had even integrated the fact that if you are traveling to work, it's even possible and added on to the time that you are noted to be spending at work. Right. So to a large extent, it's like people had done a lot of things and were really, sort of improving upon the system. And we sort of have to now sort of reset, readjust, try to look at the trust environment a bit more, because like it is said sometimes that people work and people also pay as though according to how people think they are working. People pretend to pay and people also pretend to work, literally. But then the issue of trust comes in more strongly. How do we trust ourselves to know that really I was given this task to do and I'm doing it according to what I had been requested to do, for which reason at the end of the month, I'm supposed to be paid accordingly. That for me comes in to this model more, and I'm looking at it and thinking how we sort of integrate it into the continuous improvement in different organizations. Because like George said, there's been a lot of shocks that companies have had to face. And as to how the employee-employer relationship would be moving forward, leaves a lot more to be thought about and for us to also consider. I thought I'll make that quick submission, but also to ask the question also about the gender side of things. Has it been that women have been much better at managing businesses more now than analysis that has been made on that as well? And so I'd love to hear from our two speakers whether anything particularly on that has been done, but then also the issue about continuous performance improvement and sustainability, and how what it looks like really in our current dispensation. Thank you.
Unfortunately, at some point you were breaking terribly, but I think I got a sense of what your question was. and especially when your comment about trust. I keep getting questions about people who are employees, and it appears that everybody is concerned about themselves and why they are not being paid and why they are being laid off and all of that. And so it's exciting that you bring in this other dimension of, so who is thinking about the employer? How much effort am I making now to warrant that I be paid? How many of us who are employed are not waiting for the employer to crack the whip before we actually produce what we are supposed to produce? How many of us are not waiting for the employer to employ a second level supervisor, third level supervisor, fourth level supervisor before we actually do what it is that we really have to do on the job? And so when you talk about these, I have worked in the University of Manchester setting, and then I see how people work. Somebody comes to work and they are doing their job from beginning to end. They stick to it and they make sure they produce what it is that they have been asked to do. And then I am transposed into this environment and I have to go from office to office sometimes shouting on people, why haven't you produced this? Where is the report? Where is that? And you ask yourself, how do these people think they are entitled to a certain remuneration from the proceeds of the company when you have to have 3, 4, 5 layers of supervisors before one person does what they are supposed to actually do? So this is a very turning point you brought in, and perhaps it will be another topic for discussion one day. But let me see if our speakers have their own thought on this, especially also about gender and whether or not women have had or have managed the situation better than what women have done. George?
Okay, so I have not seen any works yet, but pre-COVID, generally the labor small business literature mentions that women are more likely to give fringe benefits. So employment contracts, sick leave, maternity leave to their employees than their male counterparts. So I reckon that if we were to hold the feminist ideology to work, that or feminist ideology of management to work, then women are more likely to be considerate and less likely to lay off people, rather go for some shift system among the employees than lay off completely than their male counterpart. That's what I will theorize on the top of my head, but I have not seen any empirical papers in the face of that yet.
Okay. Vinod?
Yeah, one comment I would like to make is that, I mean, on the trust side, and I already mentioned about that, but, there are differences in job type of work people do, right? So some jobs you can measure maybe a little bit quantitatively the work has been done or not, but there are some kind of jobs which has an intangible kind of angle. You can't just measure it sometimes. It's very difficult to measure. So so you have to kind of differentiate what kind of work a person is doing and how you basically measure the performance of that particular task that the person completes, right? So and that's one aspect. You increase the kind of trust, be transparent, be communicate everything. On the other side, what George kind of mentioned is how the employers can develop some new strategies and policies in the face of COVID-19, so that can make it easier for employees to kind of deal with the situation personally on the home front side and also on the work side. So everybody has to kind of have that angle, that how we can basically collectively deal with this COVID situation and help out each other in any way possible, developing new policies, or on the employee side, working a little bit harder, making sure you communicate your work with your supervisor more effectively, more kind of frequently than the before COVID situation. So everybody's on the same page, right? So that's what basically I would kind of think, dealing with this situation. I think this situation is not going to remain forever. So time being, we just kind of deal with the situation and things will improve over time. That's the kind of attitude everybody need to kind of come up with. If possible, companies try not to lay off people. Maybe, you know, they can develop something like, you know, minimize the hours so everybody can remain employed. But the some, you know, rather than everybody working 8 or 10 hours, so you can kind of distribute the allocation of hours. So there are also those kind of policies can come up with, you know, companies can come up with. So nobody gets laid off, but everybody kind of takes a little hit in terms of reduce number of hours one can work, you know, that kind of weekly, let's say 40 hours everybody's working. But then you can kind of reallocate, you know, everybody's overall on average working like, you know, 37, 35 hours. So the company can minimize expenses in terms of payroll. So there are lots of creative ideas people can think about. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Mapa, you have 1 minute to make your comment so I can wrap up, unfortunately.
All right. Thank you, Professor. Yeah, so a couple of what I wanted to share has been talked about, except this particular point in terms of the what to do with employees in this season when the workload has got to change in a way, or when seemingly it appears that some have little to do now. I think this offers us the opportunity to actually retool our workers and train them. There are a lot of cost-effective strategies that can be used for training. And so that whilst people are not, whilst people appears to have some more time on their hands, you can subject them to some training regimes, hoping that post-COVID, they will be more retooled, more motivated, have better skills to be able to give higher performance for the organization to sort of recover what has been lost within the COVID period. I would also think that individuals should also take the whole responsibility of retooling themselves, because at least we know that some of the skills that we have are not transferable, are not resilient. And we are sure to some extent that COVID is bringing new skills. I recall a lot of people didn't even know how to manage a lot of things, like this conference calls, which have become more like go-to technologies now. So people need to learn new skills. You need to ask yourself, I'm a marketer, I need to ask myself in marketing, which other skills would I need to be able to survive going forward? So we need to ask ourselves whether we have the skills that will thrive into the future. And we know that technology is moving fast. And there are certain things we'll never revisit again post-COVID. So whilst you yourself appears to have some more time on your hands, ask yourself which other skills can you learn to be more relevant, and more particularly in the situation whereby your organization want to ask some people to go home. What is your reason? What special skill have you for which reason the organization will feel that they will hurt without your presence? So you need to make sure that you make yourself more competitive by acquiring more enduring skills as an individual. So these are the two comments I would want to add to a lot of what I have learned on this platform this evening.
Thank you very much. And now it's my singular honor on behalf of my management and the school to say first and foremost, thank you to all our participants who have spent almost 3 hours with us. At the peak of this, we got about 48 people in this Zoom platform, and there was another 44 people who watched the series on Facebook. So you are talking about almost 90 plus people who have come through. Good thing is the YouTube video is going to be available, and the video is available on Facebook. And so between now and whenever, a lot more people would have the opportunity to benefit from these conversations. But if this was possible, I really wanted to acknowledge the contribution of our colleague, Vinod, for sparing your time. We understood that you had a very tight schedule today, but you had to push things off to be able to speak to us. We don't take it for granted, and we appreciate your sacrifice for us. The good thing is that the sacrifice is worth it, because a lot of people across the world have been listening to you And we hope that this is going to make an impact in the way that we are shaping our society during this pandemic. As our colleague, the last speaker, talked about, people would have to retool themselves, organizations will have to retool the people, and this process and these conversations are part of retooling the world to take off after COVID, to manage COVID and to take off after COVID. As I said, the people watched that from the US and from Europe, and so this has been an international session. So Vinod, I thank you very much for your time. Dr. George Acheampong, thanks very much on two counts. One, that you were the one that fished out Vinod and made sure he participated at a very short notice, but that you also spent your evening speaking to us, and I appreciate all of the wonderful experiences. For our students who made time to come, we appreciate and we salute you. Keep keeping with us, and together we will be able to change the world and make it a better place. After all, our addition on earth must make the world a better place. And when somebody wakes up the next morning, because of us, they can smile because they have learned something new. I thank you very much and have a very good afternoon to our colleagues in the US, and a good night to those of us in Europe.
Yeah,
and
just one thing I would like to thank you everybody, and thank you George and Dr. Justice for inviting me to this particular webinar. It has been my privilege to kind of share some of my personal opinions on this particular topic. So I really kind of liked interacting with everybody. Lots of interesting, good questions, and lots of knowledge sharing. I also learned a lot from everybody. So this has been a great experience for me to kind of talk to everybody and kind of share some of my ideas. So Dr. Justice, I will take your kind of, that invitation, and I might probably drop by to Ghana one of the days.
Definitely, definitely.
When I go to India, I might take a detour there and stop by one of the days. Yeah, so
definitely, definitely.
Yeah,
I definitely am looking up to it.
Yeah.
We pray COVID goes quickly. And just before we go, let me again promote the book, Vinod's book to you, The Dynamics of New Firm Formation. It's available on, it's available on Amazon, and I checked, and I think it's $38 on Amazon. Please grab a copy, and I'm sure you would enjoy reading it. I'm going to try and to grab a copy myself for my library. Thanks very much, and have a very good evening. Thank you. Thank you.